Because Richard Wolff actually lost his mind during the pandemic.
I don't see this as an issue so much of science or what the CDC says. This is a movement that the left should be in there saying, you're right to be angry at mandates. That didn't have to be done. There's 100 ways you can organize to talk about and to work out procedures, have your different scientific points of view presented in a rational way, and then make a democratic decision that allows people the personal and private decisions they want to make. The rest is a scare campaign. And I've seen them before, and the ultimate objective in my mind is to reestablish the ability of those who like to give other people mandates with a position to do so. And I don't think the left belongs there.
So that's unfortunate. Richard Wolff, the Ukraine crisis, Ukraine sanctions and rising inflation. Well, this is him on his own website. So this is him without Russia paying him. Let's see what he's saying here. Fuck.
This is Richard Wolff wanting to respond about this Ukraine crisis.
Yeah.
Many of you have asked, and I want to talk to you about particularly the economic dimensions of it.
Okay.
Of course, we are all worried. Wars in Europe have been devastating. Over the last century, 40, 50 million people dead, untold numbers hurt, economies destroyed, histories upended. Extraordinary. And so, of course, we're all worried, and we should be. Accidents can happen. Nuclear powers are involved. Political considerations are making leaders desperate. All of it, a heady stew, very dangerous. But I also want to take a hard look at what is actually going on. And to do that, I need to make some comparisons. Let me start with the following. Over the last 20, 25 years, the United States has, claiming national security concerns, worried about its security. The United States has invaded two countries many, many, many thousands of miles away, Afghanistan and Iraq. I won't mention other incursions elsewhere. But those were done on urgent national security grounds, or so our leaders told us. Invasions of countries with whom we were not at war, invasions of countries that pose no credible threat to the United States, countries that weren't in any official way clearly connected to anything that happened in the United States on 9/11.
You know what? I agree. America has in fact done things that are bad. Ooh.
Most of the people involved there came from an allied country, the Saudi Arabian country. Okay. Russia now claims its national security is threatened by the expansion of NATO, an alliance that has always been directed against Russia. They are threatened by a country they border on, the Ukraine. And they've taken steps, including recognizing two former provinces of the Ukraine as needed by their national security. Russian national security, American national security. Illegal international intervention by both. Far away in one case, right up close by another. What implications you want to draw from this, I leave to you. But forget.
Okay, so for the so far, he said Russia feels threatened, right? Did he say that Russia was actually being threatened by NATO? Did he say that? I think he said that, didn't he? I want to be sure, because like so far I don't have a massive problem with this, but
always been directed against Russia.
Okay.
They are threatened
by
a country they border on, the Ukraine. And they've taken steps, including recognizing two former provinces of the Ukraine as needed by their national security. Russian national security, American national security. Illegal international intervention by both.
Okay.
Far away in one case, right up close by another. What implications you want to draw from this, I leave to you. But forgetting it is not a reasonable way to approach this situation. Second consideration. Going back to the 1990s, and one could go further, but
yeah, Ukraine wants to join NATO because they feel threatened. And whether or not, like, okay, so Russia shouldn't feel threatened, I don't think. But there is, like, you can definitely say that with the, like, if you want to give, like, to Steelman what the Eastern position is here, you could say that, I've said this a few times, that NATO is, like, just by the will of people in the in Eastern Europe, is expanding its influence eastwards towards Russia in a way that, like, wasn't really expected 20 years ago. And Russia is very, very nationalistic. And it's very easy for Putin to tap into a very real fear in Russia that they are just going to have their trade routes, like, and military capacities just blocked off and squashed inwards by Western influence. You can say all that's true. All these political realities are true and maybe could have been considered better by the West. But of course, none of it justifies recognizing separatist states in Ukraine or annexing Crimea or invading Ukraine. Like, none of it. Anyway,
just starting with the 1990s, the United States has slapped sanctions against the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and a whole host of others, countries, companies, and so on. There were stated purposes in those sanctions, as there are today. Did those sanctions work? Basically, the evidence suggests not at all. In 2014, when Russia took the Crimean Peninsula, and there were tremendous sanctions against them, did they work? Did the Crimean Peninsula revert back to the condition before Mr. Putin and the Russians went in? No. Did the Iranians fundamentally change their government, their society, their religion, their attitude towards a whole host of issues, including Israel, as a result of the sanctions there? Not much evidence of that at all. Mr. Trump's sanctions against Huawei Corporation or China with his tariffs and his trade wars, did that change China's basic policy? Did it hurt China the way Mr. Trump boasted over and over again? There's no shred of evidence to that effect. Chinese economy last year did better than ever in its growth, in its exports. Remarkable. Remarkable. Did they stop doing what they've done in the past? No. Did they change their attitude towards Hong Kong? No. Did they change their attitude toward Taiwan? No. The problem is sanctions never worked well, and over the last 30 years, the victims of sanctions have become experts more than they were ever before in getting around them, climbing underneath or over them, pretending, and all the rest. So sanctions aren't going to do much. Mr. Putin must have known, given the history, that sanctions would be applied, even before the West had told him that it would do that. And he did it anyway. Clearly, they are not the deterrent. It may be a good couple of days on television, looking and sounding tough, but it doesn't do the job. But now let me turn to what the effects of all this are going to be. Above all, this regime of sanctions. Russia is one of the most important producers and exporters of oil and gas in the world. The price of oil and gas has been shooting up in the anticipation of problems at the Ukraine, and now they're shooting up even more. You know what that will do? That will worsen and lengthen the inflation already shaking the U.S. capitalist system.
It's really difficult to understand where he wants to come at with this, because I can probably be sold on the idea that like sanctions pre-Crimea and even on China are just like, yeah, they don't produce the outcome that you want. And then I suppose does that maybe justify like more intense sanctions, which I mean obviously the sanctions they're imposing now are far more severe than what happened in the past. And sanctions are like in the nuclear age, like sanctions are really and like proxy war is really all you can do. So I don't really know. Like there is like I think something that a lot of people don't really consider is that there is just like this unfortunate like political reality that like Russia is not going anywhere, and Russia has its own economic interests, and it's a capitalist economy. It needs to and it's like propelled by a lot of the same drivers that everyone else is. You know, it needs to expand its trade, it needs to expand its influence. Otherwise someone else does. But it's like, so what do you do about that? Like I don't actually know. Apart from the fact that right now we have a democratic country being invaded against its will. So it's like, yeah, I don't really know what the use is in bringing up the fact that like that we're quite powerless to kind of like what else what else is supposed to happen? But have I considered that some sanctions didn't work in the past? No, I hadn't. So that's actually really useful, you know. Me over here, the sanction salesman, destroyed by that question. And I'm sorry, but like I'm pretty sure when Iraq and Afghanistan was happening, Richard Wolff would have just been saying, "Don't do this, like don't do this, don't do this." Like, you know, I'm pretty sure he opposed both wars. I don't know if there was the same degree of nuance and charitability offered in those situations.
To its foundations, an inflation doubly destructive because it comes after the last 2 years when we had simultaneously an economic crash of immense proportions and the worst public health disaster in American history at the same time. On inflation now is, as people are feeling it, an unbelievable extra burden, and it's going to be worsened by this program of sanctions. And
Hey guys, you know what's crazy? It's not going to last very long, but I just went on Twitch. This is the first time we've ever had more viewers than Denims. Look at that. Get fucked, bitch. Yeah, woo!
I say that even though
She's going to have more viewers than me in like 3 seconds, but you know, we've got it. We're on it.
we don't yet know, as I'm doing this, what the response will be. Let me remind everyone, in response to the sanctions in the past, the Russians, the Chinese, and so on have levied their own sanctions, and those will have an effect. And the Russians are getting good, as the Chinese are, in figuring out how to make those hurt. We're going to have quite a situation in.
Do I think that Putin's approval could take the hit of a Russian surrender? Wait, what? Like, do you think Putin's approval would go down? I think like most Russians have like a favorable view of Ukrainians, and I don't know. It's really hard to understand, like because Putin's control over Russian media and like the access to information of like Russian people is so strong. Like he's played the public narrative for decades, which is why it's so difficult to see how like his popularity can be so high on the one hand, but popularity for the war and like attitudes towards Ukrainians can be the complete opposite of what his opinion is. I don't know.
In this country, the American people are going to have to ask themselves.
Don't worry, guys. We'll get him at the ballot box next time. All right.
Is it worth it?
But I mean, Russians are like already being arrested en masse for opposing the war. So I don't know.
Really want another blow to our standard of living? Another hurdle we don't have the resources to overcome in those rising prices? Is that worth it to argue over two provinces of a country called the Ukraine that most Americans would have trouble finding on the map if asked to
The
do
fucking boomer keeps calling it the Ukraine. Oh God.
so? Well, I don't want to belabor the point, but my guess is that's not going to be a popular political or economic stance. Not at all. Let me close by telling you what, in my judgment, will be the biggest inflationary impact of all of this.
What? Come on,
the whole
dude.
world is full of businessmen and women.
I don't know how dependent you are on RT's money, but you... Oh, God. Does he actually have a thought on his mind about, like... Like, I don't know from listening to this whether or not he actually, like, supports... like, sanctions now in response to given the fact that Russia is, like, almost definitely committing war crimes at the moment, and... Oh, God. But yeah, let's look at the inflation. Yeah, we love that. It's like...
Employers who have been chomping at the bit wanting to raise their prices. The reasons are obvious. They want more profits, which is the major reason prices are raised most of the time. Indeed, if you study business, you'll know that the name of the game in business is to make
his Patreon goes up like every 3 seconds when he does this video. It's fucking mental.
Profit, and the bigger your profit, the better off you are, and the better businessman or woman you've shown the world you can be. So yeah, of course, they raise prices to make more money. But of course, that runs a risk. Your customer won't be happy to be required to pay more. And if the thought is he's only paying more, your customer, so you can make more profits, especially if you've just had a year or two of decent profits, that's not good. You know what you need? You need to be able to raise your prices and have an excuse so it doesn't look like you're doing it to make more profits. That's why folks who raise prices, and you know it's only employers that do that, nobody else raises prices. That tiny minority, 1% of our people, if that, raises the price that the rest of us pay. They always need to blame somebody else. Blame the workers, blame the government, blame the taxes, blame. But it's often as thin as I just made it look like. But this trouble in Ukraine, oh, wonderful, what a godsend that is. Every businessman or woman around the world jacking up their prices can now point to the turmoil in the war and the
Revenant with a gifted tier 1 sub. Thanks. All right, fuck you, Richard. Like, okay. Like... Oh, God. Okay. I do appreciate the contribution and the knowledge that this war, this invasion is in fact a disgrace. It is a catastrophe for small businesses. Okay, we know this. For American small business, like, okay. It's just... It's like, there is definitely like... Despite... Oh, thanks for Meat Sandwich for the tier 1 subscription. Look, we're 20% to our fucking goal, our huge goal. Oh, but yeah, it's just like the whole thing about his contribution. Like, there is like definitely some contribution that Richard Wolff has made to, like, you know, just like leftist discourse. Okay, like the reason I got into the idea of co-ops, I think the reason most of you probably know about co-ops is through Richard Wolff, right? Or someone else who heard it from Richard Wolff. Like, he was the one that really reconciled like that sort of thing, like, oh, you know, Marxism, you want worker control of the means of production, but like, how do you do that if not the government takes everything? Okay, well, yeah, co-ops, that's, no, you didn't get it from Vosh. Vosh got it from Richard Wolff, who gave it to you, okay? Like, I know this, like, I've heard Vosh's rhetoric, and it almost pisses me off, actually, that like, Richard Wolff didn't stress more often the transitionary periods, because every time I see Vosh in a debate talking about co-ops and trying to justify the idea of the government mandating that every business turns into a co-op, I'm just like, bro, shit, like you're losing everyone with it. But yeah,
the last point that I want to make is you ask what's wrong with the worker wanting to work at a more traditionally managed business, and my answer to that would be, I don't care. In the United States, you can't sign yourself into indentured servitude nor slavery, and I'm fine with that. I think that people there are plenty of economic situations where people can be forced into, even if it's for their immediate benefit, conferring their freedom upon a system which does not owe it. And I think that's a bad thing. I think it's okay to categorically prohibit anti-democratic systems.
Chomsky, well, yeah, Michael Moore brought up a little bit. The problem with Michael Moore is that he's, I don't know, kind of stupid. And Chomsky doesn't elaborate on it to the point that Richard Wolff does. Like, no. David Harvey and Chomsky, like, yeah, that's, they spoke about it, but again, like, Richard Wolff was like the guy who kind of took the torch there. He wrote the book about it. He did all the like the lectures on it and all that, like especially like during the economic crash as well. He was again one of like the few economists who actually had any kind of like way of explaining it that someone like me could understand. So, but it's really annoying, just like it's just, or maybe just like, I don't know, people get older, they get tired, they get fame drunk, I don't know, because he was a professor for a very long time, and then yeah, and they eventually just lose the fucking the grasp. Yeah.